Hello, everyone. So, I know a lot of people had comment me, saying that they would like for me to start talking about my dreams again, because it was, getting interesting to some of them. Some of them can relate to the dreams that I'm having, and so, doing it on video. So, right now, I'm still trying to get used to doing and talking about my dreams and stuff on video. Normally, I used to just go ahead and just type it out and then post it, and then you can read it whenever you would like. And so it's hard for me to, once I wake up from a sleep and I might have an important dream, because the way that my dreams are is that I can dream of different things at one time, but then it all linked to the same, the outcome will come back to the same thing. And I've been having, visions and dreams ever since I was 9 years old. I talked to y'all about that in a video that when I was 9, I used to see my great grandfather, which is on my mom's side, that I never met this man because he had died before I was born. And according to what my mom and my dad was saying, that this, even some of my mom's younger siblings was not even born either when their great grandfather, which is my great grandfather, um, was living. And I used to see at my dad's house, because my mom passed away now, God bless her soul, for some years now. But anyway, I used to see at my dad's house, if I sit in the chair that he sat in, there's a big picture window. And around like in the evening time when the sun sets, all of a sudden there will a man appear. He appeared in like some overhaul beards, or whatever you want to call the farmers type thing, with what they wear. I can't think of what the name of it, but it's what farmers wear when they out farming. It's like a whole jean jumpsuit or whatever. And he had like a red, like checkerboard type shirt. And so I would, all of a sudden I would go into like a trance, like 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 a stare. So I would go into like a stare, and then all of a sudden I would actually, I could hear my family talking, but it's like I'm somewhere else. So as I'm staring at this man, he's looking through the window, and I could see him peeping through the window and everything. And then next thing you know, I come out my trance and I said to my mom and dad, I said, look, there's a man at the window. So my dad was like, where? And so my mom was like, well, describe him. So I was like 9 years old then when I started having my real visions and as a seer and dreams and stuff like that. So next thing I know, I would describe it to my mom and my dad, and they was like, and my mom was like, oh, that's my grandfather, which is her great grandfather. And she was like, Grace, you was not even born when he was living. And so when I described him, and then I said, well, he's gone now. He's walking around the house, and I could see him walking around the house, and I followed. I went out there to the back porch that we have now, and I see the man still walking, and then he walked into the woods and he disappeared. And so when I, gave him step by step, and then I even told like some of my mom's sisters that lived there, like some of my aunts and stuff, and they all agreed that, that's who I was seeing was their grandfather. And at that time, my grandparents, my mom's mother and father was living. So when I said it, it was my grandfather's, I guess my grandfather father is who it was. And so after that, I kept seeing it for many, many years. I keep seeing this man. So at that point, I had got used to it. And then, of course, my dad would go out and shoot a gun out in the air. I don't know why he would do that, but he did it anyway. I don't know if he supposed to scare the ghosts away or what, but he would go take his rifle and then he would shoot up in the air. And I don't understand that part. But I never did understand that part as a child either. So then my dreams and visions started getting more and more. And then things that I dream of was coming to pass quickly. I mean, it would come to reality. I would either hear about it, or I would either somebody would say something, or I would witness it. And that's when I knew then I had a gift of dreams and visions, and as a seer, I could see things before it happens. And after that, that's when, I start writing down. So my mom was like, well, why don't you write down your dreams, Grace? So she understood. Dad didn't quite understood yet. And then later on, he did. As I got older, he started understanding, because then I started telling things about him. And then when I started saying that what I saw him, and I remember Dad had a real bad accident. And I had told Dad, I said, Dad, I saw you in a dream that you had a real bad accident coming from somewhere, playing cards or drinking or something. I said, but you had a real bad accident. And so when I told my dad that, he got kind of scared. He didn't say anything. He walked away from me. He got kind of scared. And don't you know, like, a couple of weeks later, my dad had a major accident. He had a real bad accident that kind of scared him. He had a concussion also after that. So then that's when my dad then started taking me seriously, now that I do truly have a gift. So he started taking me seriously now. So when I be telling him stuff, he listens. He listens now when I tell him stuff. And because it happened to him. And so then like it happened to a couple of my other aunts, and different people of the family, sometimes strangers and different things like that. And then I would go up to people. My mom would say that as I was young, I would go up to people and tell them, hey, this gonna happen to you, or that's gonna happen, be careful, whatever. And sometimes people will get scared, some will get angry, and so my mom was like, well, Grace, she said, even if you having these types of gifts and dreams and vision, and you see things on before it happened to people, she said it's not good for you to go up to people, to totally strangers, and start telling them what you see. She said, just go ahead and write it down in your journal, and and then she said, just pray to God about it. So that's what I started doing, trying to control my dreams and vision, what I see on people, and what what's about to happen to them. And I remember that my daughter's father, that one night, I had told him that if he got back into like the military, and it was a branch of military that he was trying to get back into, and I said that if he got back into it, he would not make it back alive. He'll come back home in a coffin. So he got real scared then, because the church that I went to, that he belongs to, is more like an apostolic type, Pentecostal type church or whatever. And this church was a little bit different, because this church help you develop your gifts, your spiritual gifts. So a lot of times I was there, to help develop my spiritual gift and stuff like that. Because nobody really could tell me, why I was having all the vision and dreams and stuff like that. And then how I could actually see things that happened before it happened to people. And so when I went to this church and stuff, they started telling me about, the pastor's wife was like telling me about my gifts and stuff like that, and why, you know, God placed on my life. Because I could see one time, even when I was little, before I had was joining my family church, and I think I was like 5 years old, around that, 5 or 6 years old. And I told my aunt, one of my mom's sister, and I said, look, my mom didn't go to church that day. I don't know why she didn't go to church that day, but she didn't go to church that day. And so all of a sudden, I told my aunt, I said, look, I said, I see, I said, I see God is telling me with his hands to come to him. So, and she was like, she said, well, Grace, she said, well, your mom is not here, for you to join the church. And I said, I know, Auntie. I said, but I just see God, and I see him have his hands out. I said, come to him. He's telling me to come to him. So when I seen that, so she was like, well, Grace, she said, well, if you see that, go ahead. We just have to explain to your mom and dad that you just joined church at an early age, like that. Because normally the churches don't allow you to join at that age unless your parents are around, because you have to understand, Christian way or whatever, or spiritual whatever, back in those days, before it got worse to where the churches are worse now, so I end up joining the church and stuff like that. And that's when I start having more and more vivid, real dreams and visions. And I had so many journals that I had written stuff down over the years that has happened to people and different things like that came to pass. I still have my journal now, where I have witnessed my mom and my nephew's death. And I wrote it down, and it happened 10 years after. It happened 10 years before they passed. And I still have it. And like I said, when I get home, I'll show you the journal, where the page of insert, where I had written my mom death and my nephew's death. And it was strange, because in a way, I was writing down things, like I said, because I was taught, just to write your dreams down, Gracie. Write your dreams down. Don't talk about it, just write it down. So that's why I'm so used to, when I'm when I'm talking, have dreams, I write it down, and then I'll post it on social media. So me trying to get on there now, telling my dreams on video, you have to bear with me with that, because when I start talking about a dream, I can see the vision. I can, I go into like a vision, and where I can see scenes by scenes, like a movie, where I see scene by scenes of what's happening, what the next thing will happen. So, and I'm trying to make sure that I get the dream out the correct way, as I dreamed it. It's plenty of time, like one of my dad's sister too, I used to, talk to her a lot too, about my dreams and stuff like that too. So a lot of people that I have talked to on my mom's side and my dad's side already knew about my spiritual gifts as a seer. Me having vivid dreams and different things that come to pass. When I start speaking on it, it will come directly to pass. It will come to forth. And I will actually see, and either I hear about it, or either I actually see it happen. And so with that, I have dreamt of a lot of my family members that has gone and passed away. I have, had witnessed, their death and stuff like that, that I have seen where they got sick and stuff like that in a dream, and then all of a sudden they end up passing away. So, and I have written a lot of stuff down. It was this one pastor that I had dreamed of that God has showed me, and he's gone now. His name was Bishop Eddie Long. And God has showed me in a dream that he was corrupting the church, and that a different church, T.D. Jakes and all this stuff was hiding behind his corruption. And I got it written down in the dream. Like I said, when I get home, I will show you my dream book of what I'm talking about, that I've written it down. And I will show you exactly what I have written down and everything in the book, so you can see that it was written. And then I had wrote on there too, beside that, when the dream came to pass. And so let's get back to that. So he ended up, from a long story short, and I'm not going to try to get in detail because he done passed away now, but the long story short, that he was having sex with men and paying them money, and then he was on the pulpit, as a preacher, preaching to us. And I mean, he was a good preacher. I'm telling you, he was a really good preacher, but he had sin, and he was behind the pulpit. So God was, at that time, was exposing a lot of preachers of their sin, because he didn't like it. And it came out, and ended up coming out in the news and stuff, where he was having sex with young men and paying them money. And T.D. Jakes knew about it, because he was part of the bishop over a lot of the churches and ministers and stuff like that. And I mean, it was a big scandal, a big mess, until it's called, his church was New Birth. Now I don't know who done took over New Birth now, but that's what the church was called back then. And I couldn't believe it, because I was like, wait a minute, I dreamt of this. So I had to go, when I went back to my dream book, I was like, oh my God. I said, here, go right here. I dreamt, God has showed me about this pastor. And like I said, he was a really good pastor. I used to listen to him, his sermons, because it was really good how he broke it down and everything. I mean, he had good, but he just loved men for some reason. So anyway, then it was another bishop, Bishop McClellan. And God was showing me him too. He was a good bishop also, pastor. Big mega churches. And where he ended up dying from being on cocaine drugs in a hotel. And God has shown me that too. That vision also. And like I said, I got it written down, and I'll show it when I get home. I'll bring out my dream book, and I'll show you, and that way you can see. And I was like, oh my God. I say, I dreamed about all of this stuff. So it's like, and just like God has showed me about that Trump was going to win a second term. And I post that on my social media page even before he became president again. And I have written it and showed it on my social media pages and stuff like that, my old channels and stuff, where that's where I had seen a dream of that too. And then about the controversy about where there was fighting over, it was a country where they had killed the wife and the husband and try to cover it up, conspiracy with the government and stuff like that. So it's a lot of things that I posted, and it's on this channel now too. If you go back to all my older postings, you will see all the stuff that I talk about before it happened, that it came to pass. So that's why I'm saying that when I'm talking about my dreams and visions, I am truly prophetic, always have been, since I was 9 years old. You can't just develop prophetic overnight. This has happened to me, started when I was 9 years old, is when I begin to see and then understand what spiritual gifts are and stuff like that, as you being a seer. and foretelling the future and stuff like that and what's to come. And and just by me being on video, it's kind of hard for me to talk about a lot of stuff, because I'm, like I said, I'm so used to writing things down, because that's how I was taught. They was telling me, just write your dreams down, Grace. That's write it down. And that's what I was doing. But now, since y'all saying to go ahead and talk about the dreams, because a lot of my dreams has resonate with a lot of you, has happened to you all. So, I thank you for the confirmation with that. I thank you for that. And I thank you all for believing in my spiritual gifts. Thank you. It means a lot to me to know that some of you all have resonate with some of the dreams, or you knew somebody that it had happened to. And like I say, it's hard now talking on video now to you about my dreams and stuff like that too, and how I'm seer. And so then we went to the same church. So we went to this bishop. I can't think of his name, but his church is like in West Virginia. I don't know if this bishop's still living or not, but he was a prophetic bishop too, a gift that God gave him too. And this is where the church where T.D. Jakes and his wife also grew up at. He was under this bishop. So we all was, used to go to this church and stuff like that too. Before T.D. Jakes became, popular. I knew him, when he wasn't even a famous bishop and all that stuff, him and his wife. But anyway, that's another story with that. And so we was getting into line to pray. But after that, T.D. Jakes had already gone from that church and stuff like that, from West Virginia and all that stuff. And he was on his own. But we continue to still go to this church, visit this bishop church. So when we went to his church and got in line, so he was saying, praying for people. So as he was praying for people, that's when I was, still into the church then. And he was praying for people, and and people was like, falling out as he was praying, and they won't, how you go to this church is that they pray for you. Next thing you know, they fall out in the floor and stuff like that, or pass out in the floor. And then next thing you know, they have a time they don't catch them. The people, the ushers don't catch them in time, and they hit the floor, bounce the floor and all this stuff. So I was in line. And so when I saw that, I was praying to God. I was like, please do not let these ushers, while he praying for me, and I do not want to pass out and hit the floor, my head bounce off the floor or whatever. Then I have a concussion afterwards. So as I got to him and he started laughing, and I was wondering why he was laughing, because he was like, yeah, he said, I heard you speaking to God about that you don't want to, me, when I pray for you, you don't want to hit the floor. And so I got to laughing because I was saying it to myself in my mind. That's how gifted this man was. And as a pastor. And so, and a bishop also. So, and I got to laugh. And then, of course, everybody else in the church was laughing at me, too, because, they was feeling the same way, too, that I was feeling, but they just didn't want to, say it to God or whatever. And then he ended up revealing it. And so, next thing I know, after that, he started praying for me. He said, you have many gifts. And he started talking about my gift, that me being a seer, how I saw my great-grandfather. Now, I don't know this man. I never tell people my childhood at all. So he knew a lot about me. That's how I said how gifted he are. These, how like the prophets and stuff in the Bible, how God had the prophets and stuff. Okay, well, those gifts still carry on to a lot of people to this day. And when it happened, you know, he started praying about me. He was saying, you know, telling me about my childhood. He was telling me about my first dream and vision and the gift of sight, you know, of the future and of the past and different things like that as a seer. And then he was saying also had like healings in my hand. He said, he said one time I laid my hands on somebody that was sick, I guess in my family or something, and as I was a child. And he said that I didn't know what I was doing. He said, but God told me to go. He said that God had told me to go lay my hands on the child. And then I started, on somebody, and I started praying. And so I don't remember that, you know, because like I said, a lot of things that I did when I was a child, I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember some things that God has brought to me, you know, or either, you and I have family members talk about stuff like that to me and stuff like that, what I used to do as a child. And so when he told me that, he said, you also have a gift of healing in your hands. He said, your hands can also, he said, even if you just have the faith and pray for people, he said, God can also use you to heal people. And I said, wow, you know, as a gift. I said, wow, that's a good gift, you know, to have. And he said, you can also heal yourself inside. He said, all you have to do is lay your hands on yourself and you can heal yourself inside also, bring healing. So I was like, okay, you know, along with that. And so I have done that plenty of times. Even in nursing, I have sit there and laid my hands on patients because they will ask me to pray for them. I'm not just going to this hospital and just be laying hands on people. No. You know, because, you know, we did, you know, at that time, you know, the preachers and stuff will go and pray and lay hands on people and pray for them. I was not doing that. I was only doing it if the people came and asked me. Like if the patient or whatever came and asked me, you know, to pray for them, I will pray for them and, you know, and say a prayer and all that stuff for them, because they could actually see that I was spiritual. They said that I had some type of glow on me, you know, and that they know that I was a good person. And they knew that I had truly had gifts. Like one woman in the hospital, she just read me like a book. And I was a nurse. And like I said, I don't talk about what I do in my past or my childhood to a bunch of strangers and to a lot of people. A lot of people don't know this, you know, about me having gifts and stuff at an early age and how I talk about it. Only my family would know this. And if I choose to tell my story or whatever, then you would know then. But other than that, nobody really knows a lot about me. And what I experienced as a child into my adulthood until I become who I am today. And so it's a lot of things that I could talk about, you know, that I have experienced, you know, with my spiritual gift and stuff like that. And I still have my dreams and stuff and my visions, and I still see things of the future and things like that. But I'm still going to be talking about that stuff. Get on here and talk about it. You know, when I have my dreams and stuff like that, I will talk about things of, you know, what happened, because sometimes I can have some weird dreams that doesn't make sense, and I'm not going to talk about that because I have to get clarity on that with that. So, but other than that, you know, like the one I just had about the two sisters, and that it took place located in the state of Texas. So you can always go back and listen to that video that I had posted. But until next time, this is Grace.